I'm BrauKiller, and I'm going to take you through the brewing process from mash to pitching the yeast. Let me start by saying I'm not a professional brewer. I'm an amateur brewer, part of a homebrew club, and I've brewed lots of batches of beer. I feel like I have enough experience in craft brew. Brewing on a large scale is a whole different thing. Making beer taste consistent when you're brewing it on several different continents with several different water sources is a whole different ball of wax. My goal here is to teach you how to mash the grains, extract the sugar, get good efficiency, and get a good flavor and taste profile for the beer that you're producing for yourself and for your friends at home. So let's get started. Brew day begins actually 2 days in advance of the actual brew day. Oftentimes I will use a yeast starter, especially if I expect my original gravity of my wort to exceed 1060, as I do tomorrow. I'm brewing a pale ale. And what you make is what you see here, a yeast starter. It looks complicated, but it's actually very simple. What I have here is a growler, and I have a half quart of water. And what I did in that was boil a half cup of light malt extract. So I use light because I'm brewing a pale ale, and it won't affect the color, the final color in that concentration. And when everything is sanitized, I cool what I boiled, pour it into my growler, and when temperature's down to about where I want my fermentation, so going to be right around 60-ish, 60 degrees to 70 degrees for this. Then I'll pitch my yeast from the vial I buy at the homebrew store. And over the course of a couple of days, what you'll find is that your fermentation activity will pick up, as evidenced by the bubbling you see over here. And what the setup is, you could actually just use an airlock. All my airlocks are tied up right now with other projects. But I just make a blow-off tube. You stick a rubber plunger in here, a rubber plug in here. Just run a tube into some water, and the gases will escape into the water, and as things ferment. Again, the starter is a half cup of dry malt extract and a half quart of water. Boil and sanitize things. And what will happen by tomorrow afternoon when I'm ready, my wort is ready, I will take this. I will probably pour off a lot of this. There's yeast in all this, but what you're really interested in is what this light color band down here is the yeast slurry. And that's what you want to throw into your, or pitch into your wort when things are done. Some of this, some people add hops to this and actually make a true little batch of beer out of it, but I don't see how that's important. And I've done it both ways. I've poured off a lot of liquid. I've left the liquid. I really haven't seen it impact the taste of the beer at all. So you would be okay just to, on the given day, when things are ready, you've cooled your wort and you're ready to pitch, just to dump this whole thing right in there after you've aerated the wort real good. And so this is where you begin, usually 2 days in advance. I'm brewing on Saturday. I figure I'll be done sometime around 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon. I'll start this Thursday night and get it going. I'll introduce here the equipment on brew day in the order that you'll need it. We start out on the left, thermometer, important, should be accurate, should read in relatively small increments. We need temperature, close temperature control, pretty much in the ranges between 100 and 170, 180, so you need to rely on that. The pot is what I call a decoction pot. It's not my boil pot. It's a little bit smaller than my boil pot, as you'll see. An old turkey fryer. Not many concerns about boiling my decoctions or bringing and heating them up, and we'll get into that more later. Some people may worry about the aluminum in these fryers, so I'm not too worried about that. The boil pot, maybe a concern if you brew a lot of beer. And I actually have a stainless steel boil pot, which I lent to somebody, so I will be using an aluminum boil pot, which I again will show you later down the road. And then, of course, the water, depending on the beer, you need soft water for some beers, hard water for other beers. This American IPA I'm making about 50-50, so I use half and half. I use spring water from the grocery store, and then my tap water, which is very alkaline here. You're shooting for a pH range when you're using mashing techniques, which I'll be going over with this. 5.2, 5.3 is about the ideal range, and I have a way to get myself there. I add a mash supercharger, a teaspoonful of that, into my strike water, which is what's in that pot right now. That's called serving the function of what some call a liquor tank. And I'm heating up my strike water right now, which I will show you in a few minutes. We will put into the grain and let the grain steep in that for a bit as the first stage of the mashing process. A couple things here. One, in the little jar is the mash supercharge I mentioned. $15. Should last you several years. It helps stabilize the pH. And the key is consistency. I know my water, the number, 5.2, 5.3 is important, and if you bring on a commercial scale, you need to know it. I found what works best for me in my circumstance, and this is just the way I do. So I don't measure pH directly. If I use all the same ingredients, I'm getting a consistent result. Beside that is the bag of grain, about 11 pounds of grain, three different types of malted barley in that for a pale ale. You can see on the side the cost for it, 2010 prices. So as you can imagine, brewing your own beer doesn't save you much money. You're only doing it because you like to, and a lot easier and cheaper to buy it in a store. But this is fun, as you'll see. So I've got my liquor tank, got my water heated to 106, and now let's go outside and add the grain to the mash tun and pour our strike water on it and get the process underway. Here we are at my brewery, otherwise known as my garage, and you see my liquor tank there with my water at 106. The orange cooler is my mash tun, or as the Germans like to say, mash tun. And inside I've added the grain. What I'll do is I'll pour my water on top of that in what we call the dough end stage. So I find if I pour 106 degree water in on that, my final temperature should be about 105 or 106. There are a lot of formulas to help you figure that, but I find here in Michigan this time of year, there's not a whole lot that goes into it. What you pour in for water tends to be the temperature of the mash once you get it started. So this stage is called the dough end stage. Okay, I've added my liquor to it and stirred it up, mixed it up. I've checked my temperature, and let's see, should be just over 100. The range we're looking for a dough in is between 98 and 110. I ought to hit that awful close to where I like this recipe at 104. Boom, right there, perfect. So I have the lid on my mash tun. We use a cooler, keeps the temperature constant. I'm going to let this sit for about 20 minutes. What's going to do is get a little enzyme activity. We have all kinds of starch in those kernels of grain, and we need to convert that to sugar. That's what we're hoping to accomplish in the mashing process. My liquor tank has now become my decoction pot once again, and we'll see the use of that here in a couple minutes. Side note as we get started here, beware of beer, no matter who makes it, in clear glass bottles. I bought this from the grocery store as I picked up my spring water in a 12-pack enclosed case, and it's still slightly skunked. So now I have to suffer with skunky beer while I brew. So hopefully it'll taste better as I go. Okay, it's been 20 minutes. Next job is to move, this is a quart. I want to move 10 quarts into my decoction pot. I leave it kind of thin. You take some grain, you take some water. So it should be a bit soupy. Go 1,